Hello. Good evening. Let's see who's here. Kelly is here. Hi, Kelly. Ariana is here. Welcome. Beth is here. It's not too hot in Northwest UK. That's good. That's great. So what's up with all the hot this and hot that? Well, officially we have a heat wave in the Netherlands. This is a national, subject. And as some of you may know, we're Dutch here on this end of the live stream. As some of you in the chat as well, so you will know what I'm talking about. And we like to talk about the weather. The weather is a thing. Except now the weather suddenly got really hot, and it got so hot that it became a topic on the national news channel. So our national news channel opened a heat live blog where they would post real-time updates about the hotness in the Netherlands. Long story short, a recap of the live blog is it's still hot. It's hot everywhere. It's hot in the north. It's hot in the center. It's hot in the south. It's hotter in the south than it is here in the center. But this, I love my country. When stuff like this happens, I understand that there are people who actually die of the heat. But like generally speaking, everything becomes about this thing called the weather. Alright, who else is here? Phoebe is here. Yes, you are in South Florida. So this is a relative thing, alright? It is, I think, 40 degrees between 35 and 40 degrees Celsius, which I'm not really sure what it is in Fahrenheit, but it's not impressive at all. In France, it's hotter. In Spain and Portugal, it is unbearably hot. It is not even that hot here, but it is hot for Dutch standards, and so we don't have enough problems in this country, really. Ariane, my husband has started his first day of retirement yesterday. That is cool. That is cool. In a kid's pool with Prosecco. There you go. Yes, it has started raining here in Zeist. It is, yeah, it's starting. The rain has started. The thunder may also start in a little bit, and I'm not really sure how impressive that's going to be, but we'll see about that. Wimbledon is scorching. Yes, Wimbledon is suffering. But on the other hand, they survived Roland Garros, so voila. At least it's not raining on Wimbledon. Hello, Linda. Welcome. Alright. I had a plan, and the plan kind of went out the window because I was very focused on something else this week. My plan for the next summer at least, is to sort of downgrade the amount of information that I've been sharing on the live streams. You know, we've been trying out a lot of things, including talking about some pretty advanced topics regarding color, which is, it was good. I think it's good. I feel though, however, that my live streaming level, you know, my confidence in live streaming it's difficult for me to improve my live streaming while I'm dealing with topics that are also for me quite, they require a lot of energy and a lot of thinking. So what I wanted to do is for the next few weeks, and we'll probably do some casual self-portraits, etc., in between. I want to do some simple stuff, and I got some black and white because honestly, right now my brain does not go beyond black and white today. I want to talk about this reference, and I want to talk about black and white, and I want to talk about why I like black and white. And let me grab a piece of paper first. This is, by the way, the back of some oil painting paper that I do stuff on, as you can see. But I'm out of oil paint paper, so I'm gonna take a chance and see if I can paint on the back of it. But first of all, I got a reference photo. You can paint along if you want with a reference photo in whatever style you like. But what I would like to do today, or maybe we can talk about it a little bit, is values, because we're dealing with black and white here. And the thing with black and white is I'm going to draw a little bit while I talk, so we don't run out of time. The thing with black and white, what I like, is that it limits the amount of information that you need to process. And what it basically takes out of the equation, is color. Now, some people are good. They have an eye for converting colors to value. Some people struggle. I'm one of those people. I'm one of those people who struggle. And what happens when I do a lot of color stuff is that two things suffer: my shapes and my general hierarchy. Now, what I mean by hierarchy is basically your ability to say this area, this shape is... I'm just going to grab an eraser. There we go. So basically your ability to say this shape has this value and is surrounded by these other values, right? I'm just going to go into detail about that a little bit more in a bit. So my shapes is what suffers, and consequently also what suffers is my values. The thing with self-education, which is something that I do and which is something that I know a lot of you also do, is I find it really hard to focus on one thing for a long enough time, right? And I notice this with my son when he is doing homework. After a while, you're like, okay, this was hard, and now I'm pretty much tired of it, and I don't want to repeat it again, right? But your teacher is telling you, no, you gotta finish these 5, whatever, assignments. you got to finish these 5 assignments. You got to wrestle through the repetition of things, right? Because doing it once, they say that, right? Doing it once is luck. It's getting lucky. Doing it twice is okay. Being able to consistently repeat something at a certain level is when you can say, I can do this, right? So the thing that I struggle with myself and, in general, trying to increase my skill, is I don't repeat things often enough. And that's something that I've been working on changing that. Like, it goes back and forth, right? I'm not somebody who goes, okay, Monday through Friday, I'm only going to focus on this one thing. That's just not something that's ever going to happen, which is also fine. But while doing the color streams, if you will, I realized it was maybe time to go back and do a little bit of basic stuff. So here we are with black and white. So the thing with a portrait is that most people, and I think you will notice that, when you start simplifying things, you will notice that if you limit yourself to too few values, you feel like you can't really make that choice, right? Where does the value belong to? To what value does a shape belong to? And I think most people agree that you can paint a decent portrait with, say, 5 values. It's often convenient to stay in the uneven numbers, because with 5 values, you have your shadows, your absolute darks, right? That can be the eye, if you have dark eyes or if you have dark hairs. You have the absolute whites, and the absolute whites are not reflections because of skin grease or the eye white or stuff like that, but just really the lightest value. And then what you have in between is you have 3 midtones, this one being the middlest of the midtone, yeah? So with 5 values, and maybe a little bit of blending here and there, you can get a decent portrait. And when you start sort of downgrading that to 3, things become a little bit interesting, a little bit difficult, a little bit interesting. The reason why is because you start asking yourself, okay, if I had to choose, where does this value belong to? Number 1, number 2, or number 3? Now the 1 is already reserved for the absolute dark. Say that we choose the hair for that, and also this side of the face. you can't really reserve it for anything else, right? Because dark is dark, that's it. The white, the lightest value, and number 3, is reserved for the lightest area. If you have this side ways lighting, that's gonna be here, right? So you can't really touch this. And then you have the middle value, and with that middle value, you kind of have to shape your whole structure, your whole face. And it's an interesting thing to practice. And I'm saying practice because I understand that people say 5 values for a portrait. But if you're practicing, it's nice to say, okay, well, maybe we can push that, right? Maybe we can push it down to 3 values. So we have here. And see what happens then. So now we have that number 2 value that we haven't placed yet. And what you can see is that this, we decided, right, is the lightest area of the face. And here we have these cutouts, if you will, that define her, the area above her eyelid, and here the cheek. And so you see that if you want to differentiate between a light and a dark side, you're going to have to tone these down, right, to a number 2 value. The other thing here is that is missing is the actual structure of the eye socket, because we have the eye and it's floating in this white area of the face, right? So maybe we want to add a little bit of structure there. In fact, I feel like you could actually do this whole side, right? Because whenever light hits from this direction, it usually ends up here. This will be the lightest area. So you could choose to incorporate the forehead into the value number 2. And maybe even, you know, the nose is going to stick out, so maybe there's a ridge there. Casting, not casting light, getting light. And then this area here might also be a number 2. Now also the ear, of course, has, it's further back, and it has a dark, you know, you can put a general shape in there. So now we have something that doesn't look as creepy as when the eye is just like floating there. That's a general idea of 3 values. So that's kind of what I want to do, because again, I understand that for a portrait you can do more values, but what I want to show is that you can also do a lot with 3 values. So let's go in here for a bit. And let's not make our number 2 value too dark. In fact, let's make all of our values a little bit closer to each other, right? So that's the other thing with a value range. You don't have to do white, mid-tone black. You can do light gray, mid-tone, dark gray. Sometimes it helps with, you know, the contrast between white and black is just huge. Oh my. I live in a concrete building, so it always takes quite a while for the building essentially to cool down. All right. Kelly, this is so helpful. That's really cool. I appreciate that. Yeah, I felt a little bit weird not being, you know, for my, I wouldn't say standards, but I like to prepare well. But this has been something that I've been working with for quite some time. When I started learning it also in a way comes maybe a little bit natural to me, as in my mom is a photographer, a lot of black and white. If you are a color person, and I think I said this in my classes as well, color makes you very happy. Then you can also choose a color, right? You can choose bright red, blue, whatever you want, basically. And then use that color as your number 1. I think the dark we call number 1 values, right? I don't know why I set this up so big. I meant to paint this much smaller. All right. Yeah, let me grab a bigger brush. What a cute photo. Yeah, she's very cute. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I know, Linda. Your work is so, like, amazingly colorful. And I love, for some reason, I love colorful things. maybe it's because it's a little bit exotic for me, if you will. Heat, yes, heat, it is. Yeah, I can imagine. Some of you guys, it's even harder, the heat. I'm just complaining about nothing. Like, I hope you realize that. I'm just joking. I used to live for the sun, Ariel. Yes. I have to say though, I function better in warm weather. Like, I have a pretty decent tolerance for heat. But this stuff is something else. So I'm curious, and regarding learning and teaching yourself, like I said earlier, one of the things that I find really difficult about self-teaching anything, by the way, because I self-taught myself programming and pretty much everything, and it's not just an art thing, it's a recurring theme. And I'm curious because I know a lot of you are self-taught when it comes to art, and I'm curious what area that you tend to avoid or don't really feel like struggling through, right? If you had to choose between, say, shapes, proportion, construction, that stuff, I tend to want to skip that and go straight for the details. Or is it values? Or is it color? And of course there's one more that we all tend to avoid maybe a little bit in portraiture, and that is composition. Perspective. Can you tell I avoid that one because I didn't even mention it? Perspective, yes. I remember getting perspective drawing in high school, and I was an avid drawer. I was very much like, yay, drawing. And then they made us do perspective. Oof. Shapes are difficult for my brain, but I want to learn. Yes. Values can be avoided. Too important. No, it's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. Studying values is really when I realized how, I don't want to say bad because it sounds negative, but how underdeveloped my art was. Values made that very clear. All right, let's see. I know that when I bought a little skull to be able to look out when drawing or painting face to help me with the depth areas of the face for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, the thing is, just looking at things with the intent to see value, to see shape, to see depth, sort of, it's like fitness for your brain, right? Hello, Dylan. Yes, it is hot. Kelly says, all of it, I suppose that the transition from blocking into shapes to the detail part is not natural for my brain. It just wants to do the details and figure it out as I go. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Me too. It's, what is that? Is there like a psychological explanation for that? Is it something maybe with a human brain to, you know, zoom in on details? Yes, there are crowns next to not everyone, but alright. Well, Dylan, you just promoted from crown number 2 to crown number 1, and Kelly is crown number 1. I hate to say it, Linda and Ariana, but apparently you have no crown. I don't know why this is. It's so weird. I don't know why this is. I did notice, however, that when I started planning my stream, some of the wording in the back end of YouTube was a little bit different, and stuff like that tends to freak me out. Like, did I do something wrong? So maybe they changed a bunch of stuff. I want a crown. Do I have a crown? Let me scroll back. No, I don't have a crown. We're plebs, Beth. We're just the average folk here. Surrounded by kings and queens. Alright. Oh, gamified commenting, yeah. I'm not a fan. I have to say I'm not a fan of it. It's like stuff's overwhelming enough. All right. I think it looks decent. Let's see if we can do the nostril a little bit. Whoop. There we go. Sort of, kind of. And you can spend some time just doing this cutout shape if you want, and see what happens if you pull out a little bit here and a little bit there. What helps me a lot is to take any reference photo and throw it in a posterizing app or software that you have on your computer, something that posterizes it, basically lumps all the color values together and then make it black and white. And try, and what I do sometimes is I try to find a relation between the angles. So you have this angle here at the nose a little bit, and then you have this angle here, and it's a little bit like there's a relation here. You can also align this, and then I feel like the ear should be a little bit lower. We can adjust that in a little bit. So you can align stuff like this. You can align it horizontally, you can align it vertically, and get a better understanding of the relations between certain key areas, right, in the face. Top fans, leaderboard, oh Lord. Place for, oh my God. There's an app called Notonizer that does that. Oh, very cool, very cool. Yeah, that's good, that's good. And I do want to say one thing about that, because there are some, right, there are going to be some people who say, no, don't use posterized or median blur, which is a different type of blur that also simplifies stuff but maintains the edges. Don't do that. And just like with everything that people tell me not to do, I generally tend to do, and so should you. But the thing is, the reason why people say don't do that is because what they meant to say, but I'm going to assume they forgot to mention that. Like, I'm not saying they're being dickish about anything, but they probably forgot to mention that they mean don't do this when you are further along in a portrait, right? If you start detailing or you start adding depth, etc., etc. But we're practicing here. And with practice, you can do whatever the hell you want. The purpose of practice is to make progress in the area that you want to improve in. So I put in this dark blob, and now this here, this distance, is a little bit too small, too short, I think. All right. See if we can take off a little bit of paint there, and then the rest we can cover. I like oil paint for stuff like this. I really, really do, because it is easy to take your time, be cool, be calm. Nobody wants to paint with acrylic paint in these weather conditions, right? So this is my lightest value. Ah, I'm being called by my kids. Yes, goodbye. Here looks perfect to me. Yeah, I think. Oh, this angle messes me up so bad. We'll see about it in a bit. Sarah, how do you feel about gouache? That is the one art supply, don't tempt me. That is the one art supply I don't own. Like, seriously. I don't think there's an art supply in the world that I don't own. Except for gouache. I drew the line at gouache. I have a ton of watercolor. So I have zero feelings about gouache, except for, you know, the 10 times that I found a reference that or a painting that I wanted to paint in oil, and then halfway I was like, oh, it's done in gouache. So the portrait that we did last week by Paula Modersohn was done in gouache. And I mean, yeah, if you can make that work, I mean, it looks like an awesome. Gouache is how do you say that? Resoluble? Like you can reactivate it, right? It does not dry permanently, does it? It's a shame that Dylan is now off, because I think he owns some gouache. Acrylic gouache, yes. So yeah. I have another question then. What's the difference between acrylic paint and acrylic gouache? Does it just dry like matte or something? Does it have some additive? Those are my thoughts. I've seen some amazing paint. Yes, I only have a little set. Yeah, the white one with watercolors is something you see a lot. I think of regular gouache as opaque. Yes, it is opaque watercolor. There is I think a chalk binder or something in there that makes it opaque. Between acrylic and watercolor, yeah. So from what I heard, it's basically, yeah, like Kelly said, an opaque watercolor. And I know it because I had some colleagues when I worked in 3D modeling who did illustrations in architectural illustrations in gouache. Beth says, I just got to set up Holbein acrylic gouache before I got sick. Oh, that sounds good. Like, I like Holbein watercolors. They're nice. It's like a matte chalky face. Yeah. And so the thing in illustration, I think the reason why they used gouache is because when you then photograph it, it doesn't have any kind of sheen because it's all matte. So I believe that was the reason why they used that. I remember Golden a while ago had this series called Matte, I think. It was acrylic paint, or was it flat? I can't remember. No, it was matte, so it was sort of a matte acrylic. And I think they stopped making it. Alright, let's see if we can... Fashion designers. Yeah, no sheen. I think comic book illustrators possibly as well. So we have number 1 and we have number 3, and now it's a bit of a mind fuck because the paper is white. So let's go ahead and cover that. Let's go in here first. So I said oil paint is good for stuff like this. And I know some, people tend to avoid oil paint because there's all kinds of weird pressure that people feel. But again, the reason why this is so good is that you can correct anything you want. So I had this here, right? This was really dark. And I know that when I took it off with the cloth, you didn't really see a lot of change in terms of, you don't get back to the white of the paper. But what you do is the black that remains is basically sunk into the paper or into your canvas or whatever, and it's really easy to paint over because these light values are titanium white and they're super opaque, so they have major coverage. And the thing with wiping away oil paint especially is that you stop it from mixing with the value that you're trying to cover it with. So even though optically it doesn't seem to want to be removed, it actually does wipe off really well. So you can make a lot of alterations, and you can block in. You can see me here, I'm just blocking and blocking. And the edges tend to sort of, you know, hug each other, be a little bit cute. It looks good out of the box, right? So this is my plea for oil paint as a practice medium. And the other thing is, they don't tend to change value. They change value a little bit as they dry, but because they dry so slow, you don't really see it while you're working. And acrylics have a tendency to dry a little bit darker, which is difficult when you do value studies. What is your favorite brand in oil? Are there many? I want to get a small set. Well, you're in the United States, Linda. So here's the thing with oil. I have a ton. Like, I have all the brands that I could get my hands on because I was trying to see what is the fuss, right? Because oil paint people can be very, no, use this brand. No, only that brand. So I was like, okay, what's the fuss? And it's really just 20% preference and 80% people being weird about things. And what was important for me when I started painting with oil paint is that it was affordable, because I can't afford to spend Lord knows how much on oil paint without feeling that I need to use it sparingly. And I don't want to use it sparingly when I'm practicing, right? I just want to slap stuff around and then throw it away. So one of the brands that I started with, and I don't know if it's available in the US, but I worked a lot with the student grade Daler Rowney. They have a line called Georgian, and it's a really great high quality student grade paint. If you're in the United States, I like Gamblin. There's really very little wrong with Gamblin paint, and I think they're pretty affordable in the US. My go-to titanium white, which I think is an important pigment, you know, to sort of get right because you use it a lot, is Old Holland. And I know that Old Holland is a little bit expensive in the United States because it's a European brand. What else do I have? Yeah, I have some Rublev. But I would not recommend Rublev for anyone starting with oil paints, right? Rublev sort of prides itself in being historically accurate. It also means that they don't add anything to their paint that stabilizes it because they didn't do that 400 years ago. So that's kind of a paint that you gotta want that. And the thing with a stabilizer is that it prevents the pigment from separating from the oil. This is not a problem you want to have when you start out. Also, don't really believe that a stabilizer doesn't really take anything away from the stability of your paint layer. So I don't really see the point. I'm pretty sure somebody else can make a better argument for this. But the one thing that I always recommend anyone who does my courses, or I have a lot of questions always about, what can I use? Use what you feel comfortable kind of wasting, if you will, within your budget, really. Few colors to paint portraits. The Zorn palette. The Zorn palette is great. Like, the Zorn palette, I think is great. We're gonna go there eventually. Yeah. Don't buy Vermilion. Don't do that. I know the classic Zorn palette is Vermilion red. Don't do that. It's very toxic. One down. See, this is luck, right? Alright, so now we have 3 values in, but we haven't really finished the ear, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to lower it a little bit. I'm liking the colors in the intro set for Dale Rowney. Oh, that's cool. No Vermilion. You should. All right. Here's the thing. I'm not a fan of companies promoting severely toxic pigments. All right. So I love Rublev. I love their paint. I love their stuff. We talked about this before. But being a company that sells historically accurate paints and pigments, they have a lot of lead. They have a lot of lead-based colors like Naples yellow. And they now have a limited edition. You gotta go on the website and check this out. They got a limited edition batch of Chinese Vermilion that I think is sold for like, I don't even know, like $190 or something. With a little seal on it, a little wax seal, and a little ribbon around it. I'm not a fan of that. Like, we have regulations for things like this in the European Union regarding lead containing anything. So that includes paint, right? So you can't buy lead white. Here in the European Union, unless you have how do you call that? You are a restorer, so you have a conservator status or something like that. So you work as somebody who restores old paintings. Then you can apply. So you got to fill in the forms. You got to do all the stuff. But even as a professional artist, that's a bit of a no. So the idea that you can order a jar of mercury sulfide, is it? Vermilion? That stuff is so toxic, oh my. And have it shipped to you together with a tube of lead white is just beyond my my understanding here. It is 9 o'clock already. All right, let's try and wrap up the edges a little bit. Cool. I'm cheating. This is not 3 values. So just to wrap up, because I know it's 9 o'clock. Once you're happy with what you have, that is when you can focus, I feel, on transitions, right? So there is a transition going from the shadow into the cheek. And there are also areas that have much harder separations. For instance, here's the light and here's the dark, and there is very little transition because they're not of the same thing, right? It's hair and it's skin. The same is here. And I feel like once you divided everything in 3 values, you can go back into your shapes and say, all right, if I add this number 2 and number 4 value, this one, so this one and this one into it, then the number 4 would be sitting in between this value and this value. You can mix that on your palette, get that in between value and see where does it belong. Does it belong somewhere here? Probably not, because if there was a shape here that belonged to a value in between here, we would have already assigned it to either this value or this value, so it would have been here, right? And you think about the hierarchy, your value hierarchy like that, then starting with 3 values suddenly makes sense. And then when you make the step to 5, there is already a lot of logic here that you can work off. And maybe we can do that next time. I'm going to see if I can speed this stuff up and maybe not paint so big. That would help. And then we can maybe move into the value number, well, in between here and then in between these two, and see how we can integrate that. And then we're getting closer to actual detail, because detail is nothing else than nothing other than very tiny shapes with a certain value. Right, so we can move into that area. Yeah, for now, what I like to do, because this is not perfect by any means, what I like to do in my spare time when I'm practicing is to take a photo with my phone and try and see if I can get the reference photo and the thing that I painted side by side and just flip, like swipe left, right, left, right, left, right, and see where I can sort of, all right, this is a little bit off, like this is a little bit off here, I can see that right now. Take a photo with your phone, it's smaller, and you see it in a more, what's the word? I'm lost. for words. It's smaller. Smaller is better sometimes. Right? It's the same as stepping away from your painting, moving away. Basically just making the object smaller, making the details smaller. Alright, I need water. Let's see. Thank you for explaining all that. You're welcome, you're welcome. Fabulous session. Learned so much, even if exhausted. Yeah, just chill out. Stay calm. And thank you. Thank you. I have a Lucas Berlin. I have a Lucas Berlin water-soluble oil drawer somewhere in my drawer. Lucas Berlin is one of those brands that is a little bit underestimated. I like Lucas Berlin. It is very affordable. Paint, they have a regular oil paint line that is also really good, like really good. And their water solubles are also very nice and very affordable. It has vermilion hue. Yeah, so a hue basically is something that matches the color, but isn't that thing. So you also have cadmium hues and all sorts of expensive pigments. They make a hue, and it's often an azo red or I don't know, maybe a naphthol, but it's probably an azo red because it's a cheap synthetic light fast pigment. So Kelly says this makes so much sense. You're welcome. Flip between the two frames that are, yeah, that is really Ariel said, my girl looks 20 years old. Yeah, this is, children, I said it before when I was painting my son, right? The proportions are wild. She looks too old, my girl looks too old as well. Very often what we tend to do is we make this too big, right? From the chin to the bottom of the nose in children tends to be quite small because the skull it doesn't grow that much. So the skull is basically too big, and that makes everything else look smaller. So it's usually this area that we tend to adultify, But it's millimeters that make someone suddenly look like they're 20 years old. Cool. All right. I had a good time. Yeah, alright. Let's, make a bit of a series out of this. I'll try and get a bit of structure in it so that I can, offer some progression in what I'm explaining. But, yeah, so far, so good. I would say stay cool, but it's still bloody hot here. So I'm just gonna go lay on my couch and sweat like a camel in the desert. Alright. Thank you again for joining me. I will see you on social media, and I will talk to you again next week. Thank you again for joining me. Bye.